Feedback and Disequilibrium in Human Overpopulation. By SteveThisn B Kurz, Countercurrent. Overwhelming evidence has engendered a consensus among global scientists that the human population level and trend are unsustainable. Although we are a part of nature, we may have some choice in the ongoing process of which our numbers are but one variable. Individual, social, and institutional factors are examined, and policy options are considered. Evidence is given debunking the claim that the rich attempt to coerce poor nations to reduce fertility. Carrying capacity and optimum population concepts are discussed, particularly as to equilibrium potential. Prospects for proactive success are entertained. Introduction. A suitable total for the number of citizens cannot be fixed without considering the land. Plato, Laws, v. During the new millennium, many unexpected events and conditions will undoubtedly surprise our progeny and us. Perhaps the decline of fossil energy sources will be rendered benign due to scientific discoveries. Perhaps Factor 10 improvements in technological efficiency will aid in the rehabilitation of the environment. Perhaps our species will self-select for survival tolerances in polluted or otherwise altered conditions. These possibilities are little more than speculations. We can have a bit more confidence that our numbers will not continue the growth pattern of the last century, during which they quadrupled. This paper will briefly explore why it is that a consensus of the world's experts believe the rate of growth will continue to slow, whether or not a reduction or crash is likely, and if it is plausible that stabilization might occur at some level other than extinction. Some people claim that humans are somehow exempt from the sorts of systemic constraints, which limit the populations of other life forms. We indeed have managed to extend our range into vastly diverse habitats due to our adaptive fitness. Language, abstract thought, and reflective consciousness are traits which aided this expansion. However, in a largely closed system, physical expansion cannot be infinite. We will explore possible scenarios, which might lead to stabilization or equilibrium. Projections vary somewhat, but the next half-century is conservatively expected to result in a 50% increase to approximately 9 billion of us. We will explore the extent to which it is conceivable that human planning could affect the actual outcome. The first section will provide brief evidence that overpopulation is a problem. The fascination with virtual realities and the myth of the dematerialization of economies are examples of impediments to the grasping of this issue. The vast majority of humans who are unwired know they cannot live on bits and bytes even if some of us believe otherwise. Their needs include food, water, and energy. The second section will outline some variables affecting human reproductive behavior as positive and negative feedback. They include our genetic makeup, hardwiring, environmental conditions, socioeconomic values, institutional pressures, and what is called free will. Next will be the question of what could constitute equilibrium. Carrying capacity connotes a maximum number of a species, which can endure in a habitat. Tolerances in a complex ecosystem are variable to inputs and internal changes, and are most sensitive when near maximum thresholds. Freedom has been described as the key human value, and it is reflected in maximal options for future decisions and actions. Buchanan, 1997, equilibrium seems inconsistent with carrying capacity, since the proximity of potential constraints would reduce future options and maximize the destabilizing risks of changing conditions. If attainable, equilibrium at some variable optimum level should maximize freedom and well-being, and minimize destabilizing occurrences. Finally, I will venture into the realm of speculation to consider the prospects for success in the self-determination of equilibrium. Peace and the minimization of future suffering seem to be related to the ultimate outcome.
Thank you, Stephen, for your presentation. As I have said, there are several issues on which I would take issue with you philosophically and also with respect to your interpretation of what a systems view is. My intention, in my presentation, is not to debate and seek through rhetoric to persuade our audience. Rather, it is to look at the data and to see if your arguments are supported by the data we have. Your talk is from your paper in 2000, so almost 20 years have elapsed since then, and of course since the first Limits to Growth published by the Club of Rome, of which you are a member of the Canadian branch, some 50 years have passed. First of all, I would like to define some scientific terms, outline some concepts and pose some hypothetical questions. Linguistics. Why isn't prosequences a word? Answer 1. There's pros and cons and consequences. No prosequences, I pronounce it like prosecute. I am aware con means with, and it's with a sequence, but most of the time it's always used negatively. Why doesn't prosequence exist then? How did pros/cons arise in relation to consequences, and is it just coincidence that they're similar? Answer 2. Pro et contra means for and against in Latin. That's where pros and cons come from. Consequent, late 14c, inference, conclusion, from Old French consequence result, 13c, modern French consequence, from Latin consequentia, from consequentum, nominative consequens, present participle of consequi to follow after, from com with, sequom, plus sequi to follow, see sequel. Sense of importance, circa 1600, is from notion of being pregnant with consequences. The con in consequence does not have the same origin as the con in pro/con. Consequence means important things follow after, not negative things follow after. Experiential, sensory perception. The five senses are smell, sight, hearing, touch, taste. Additionally, there is the sense of space. In addition to the traditional big five, there is another sense that deals with how your brain understands where your body is in space. This sense is called proprioception. Additional senses and variations. There are more subtle senses that most people never really perceive. For example, there are neuron sensors that sense movement to control balance and the tilt of the head. Specific kinesthetic receptors exist for detecting stretching in muscles and tendons, helping people to keep track of their limbs. Other receptors detect levels of oxygen in certain arteries of the bloodstream. Sometimes, people don't even perceive senses the same way. People with synesthesia can see sounds as colors or associate certain sights with smells, for example. In science, there are also contradictory or problematical concepts such as wave-particle duality. There are also energy fields to consider. These fields are magnetic and electrical.
What problem? Intensification of production to feed an increased population leads to a greater increase in population. Peter Farb, 1978. Albert Bartlett, Emeritus Professor of Physics at the University of Colorado, has demonstrated that with a 1% annual growth rate, human population would in 17,000 years equal all the atoms in the universe. Bartlett, 1996, as a reference, the last ice age was about 17,000 years ago. We currently are growing at a rate around 50% faster than that. Bartlett was responding to the claim of the possibility of 1% annual growth of the human population for 7 billion, then corrected to 7 million, years by management professor Julian Simon. If space were the only requirement for a healthy, enduring habitat, the issue would be relatively easy to address. In short, sustainable, non-stop growth of physical systems is an oxymoron. Following are some opinions from diverse sources. In a letter to me dated October 3, 1996, U.S. Vice President Al Gore stated, "I consider the dramatic growth in the world's population to be the greatest challenge currently facing the environment. The effects of this rapid increase are felt around the globe. Starvation, deforestation, and lack of clean water are just some of the problems." Stuart L. Udall, former U.S. Secretary of the Interior, wrote in a recent essay, "Current consumption of the two cornerstone resources of modern life, water and oil, foreshadow shortages that will cripple the economies of many nations if present population trends continue." Udall, 2000.
Two people interpreting the same data in different ways, that's metaphysics. Is a quote from an interview published in Scientific American with Thomas Kuhn, the coiner of the term and proposer of the concept of paradigm shifts. https://blogs.scientificamerican.com/crosscheck/what Thomas Kuhn really thought about scientific truth/. Stevens' paper is summarized for him in a monument known as the Georgia Guidestones. The inscribed summary is this: maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. 1. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. 2. Unite humanity with a living new language. 3. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. 4. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. 5. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. 6. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. 7. Balance personal rights with social duties. 8. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. 9. Be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature, leave room for nature. Regarding the data on population and taking Ehrlich's paper which Stephen quotes, we find this.
Klaus Bloembergen, Nobel winner in physics and Harvard professor, said in a presentation to colleagues, would a total world population of about 1 billion as existed 200 years ago represent a reasonable compromise between quantity and quality of human life? The answer, clearly involves value judgments. Bloembergen, 1996. J. Kenneth Smale, professor of anthropology and sociology at Kenyon College in Ohio, has an argument for a sustainable optimum of approximately 2 billion by the beginning of the 23rd century. He presents much evidence that mere stabilization during the 21st century will result in a future demographic catastrophe. Smale, 1995.
i.e. the material realm. Václav Smil, not the Smale, Stephen mistakenly said he had quoted, as Smil, in the subject paper to which I am making this response, says this of the polarities of the two schools of thought on overpopulation. Extreme carrying capacity estimates go far outside the broad, fourfold range bracketed by the estimates just cited. They have been defined by true believers in the antipodal camps of catastrophist and cornucopian futures. A generation ago Ehrlich, 1968, wrote that the battle to feed all humanity is over and that hundreds of millions of people are going to starve to death during the 1970s. To Ehrlich's global population maximum would have to be well below the 1970 total of about 3.7 billion people. In contrast, Simon, 1981, maintained that food has no long-run, physical limit. These extremes leave us either with the prospect of eliminating about half of humanity in order to return the worldwide count to a supportable level, or with visions of crop harvests surpassing the mass of the planet itself. 3 as Sovey, 1949, 774, noted crisply, lack of precision in data and in method of analysis allows shortcuts toward reaching an objective predetermined by prejudice, shaped largely either by faith in progress or by conservative skepticism. Unfortunately, less extreme estimates have been hardly more impressive. Because the question
nature will provide, as they say, but what percentages of any cure will be higher mortality versus lower fertility? What percentages of lower fertility could be due to willful constraint versus physiological changes? We may have some choice in the answers to these questions, but acts of omission, purposeful inaction, decrease that possibility. Smale says he is cautiously optimistic that humans will take global action based on an individual and collective concern for posterity. Bloembergen summarizes 6 measures proposed by Joel Cohen, which have been widely supported. Educate and empower women, educate men, promote the distribution of contraceptives, save the children, improve the economics in developing countries, all of the above. Abernethy strongly supports the empowerment and education of women. The economic element may need refinement to address the opportunity model, Abernethy and Smale, in which population expands in sync with perceived future well-being. This is the most difficult element of feedback to address in my opinion, since the poor naturally and expectedly strive for better material conditions. Perhaps sustainable development combined with other comprehensive measures is the right approach. Traditional development with minimal population policy action is a recipe for continued suffering by humans and the rest of the planet, only greater in scope and severity. Udall's essay calls for the establishment of a direct-to-the-people non-profit organization financed by a consortium of billionaires. It would be primarily locally staffed, and deliver women-to-women reproductive health services to the poorest nations of the world. The Ted Turner, Bill Gates, George Soros, Rockefeller, Packard, and many other foundations have recognized the importance of this issue. It may well be that those enmeshed in fierce economic competition are blink-erred by their focus to succeed, while those who are very rich have the opportunity to step back and look farther into the future. $1 trillion in assets passed to progeny can't by itself guarantee them a peaceful planet, clean air and water, delicious healthy food, and the joys of a diverse natural environment. A primary need is for human action to accelerate systemic feedback to augment women's empowerment, health, and education. The technical means already exist to control fertility. A second, and not previously mentioned challenge is the need for systems science methodology to grow worldwide and to ultimately replace irrational, power-based approaches to social organization. Overpopulation is but one of the global issues we must address, and the principle of the weak link applies to the whole system.
Syndrome in her book Stories, Hysterical Epidemics and Modern Media, 1997, comes to mind. It could apply equally well to the consensus-based policy lead evidence-making of overpopulation and the settled seance of anthropogenic/anthropocentric global warming. All the evidence today shows that what was once a potential problem theoretically has not materialized into a problem, and whilst there are areas of bounded difficulties, the by pragmatic and applied know-how and technology modern production and farming can solve the problems that really exist. The invented, imagined and exaggerated problems based upon conjecture and appealing to the authority of consensus are not matters of settled science but matters of politics and vested interests and sophistry. Attributes of science. 158b. The monetary and financial system of an economy are part of the socio-politico-economic control mechanism used by every state to connect the economy with the polity and society. This neural network provides the administrative means to collect taxes, direct investment, provide public goods, trade. The money measures provide a crude but serviceable basis for the accounting system, which in turn, along with the codification of commercial law and financial regulation, are the basis for economic evaluation and the measurement of trust and fiduciary responsibility among the economic agents. A central feature of a control mechanism is that it is designed to influence process. Dynamics is its natural domain. Equilibrium is not the prime concern, the ability to control the direction of motion is what counts. Money and financial institutions provide the command and control system of a modern society. The study of the mechanism, how they are formed, how they are controlled and manipulated, and how their influence is measured in terms of social, political, and economic purpose pose questions not in pure economics, not even in a narrow political economy, but in the broad campus of a political economy set in the context of society. Martin Shubik. When among the myriad forms of life, man has too long forgotten that the earth was given to him for usufruct alone, not for consumption, still less for profligate waste. George Perkins Marsh. Sight is a fact.
Say hello to everybody.